The air hit me like a wall when I stepped off the shuttle, thin and sharp, pulling at my lungs with every breath. I crunched through the snow toward the resort, boots sinking just enough to remind me this place didn't forgive mistakes. I'd left the city behind, the endless horns, the crowds pressing in like they owned you. I needed this silence, the kind that settled heavy on your shoulders. Or so I thought. Orientation was in the main lodge, a wood-paneled room smelling of pine and damp wool. That's when I saw her. Mara, the ski patrol chief, stood at the front, arms crossed, her gaze sweeping the group like she was already sorting who could handle the mountain and who couldn't. She was built solid, like the ridges she patrolled, dark hair pulled back under her cap, eyes the color of storm clouds. Reserved, yeah, but there was an authority in the way she held herself, unflinching. The cold wind whipped outside as we filed out, carrying the hum of the chairlift starting up, mechanical and relentless. It overloaded everything, the bite on my cheeks, the way the world narrowed to white peaks and blue shadows. But her presence pulled at me, an immediate tug. The world felt too big out here, too quiet, yet somehow confining, like the snow trapping you in place. I'd signed on as a groomer for the season, running the snowcats to smooth the runs before dawn. Simple work, they said. But the stakes were clear. One wrong move on these unpredictable slopes, and the mountain swallowed you whole. Survival wasn't just about the job. It was about proving I could last. My first shift started before the sun cracked the horizon, the cold seeping through my layers like it had a grudge. Sub-zero temps turned every movement into a fight. Fingers numb on the controls, breath fogging the cab of the snowcat. I'd worked machinery back in the city, hauling equipment for construction gigs. But this beast was different. Heavier, meaner, with treads that chewed the snow like teeth. I gripped the levers, willing my hands to steady as I eased it onto the slope, the engine's rumble vibrating up my spine. From the patrol hut perched on the ridge, I felt her watching. Mara. Her silhouette framed in the window, unflinching gaze cutting through the early gray. She didn't wave or call out, just observed, like she was reading the mountain through me. It made my neck prickle, that silent assessment. Was I too green? Too city-soft for this? The run was steeper than it looked from the maps, powder giving way to ice patches that jerked the cat sideways. I corrected too hard, the machine lurching, one tread catching an edge. Snow sprayed up, and for a second, I thought we'd tip. Heart thudding, I killed the engine, boots hitting the packed white as I climbed out to check. Inexperience burned in my cheeks hotter than the wind. A loose chain on the undercarriage, nothing major, but enough to expose me. She appeared then, snowshoes whispering over the crust, toolkit in hand. No words at first, just knelt beside the cat, her gloved fingers working the links with practiced ease. I handed her the wrench from my belt, our knuckles brushing. Brief, but it sparked something unspoken, a tension that hung in the air like static before a storm. Her touch was steady, warm through the layers, and I pulled back too quick, pretending to scan the slope. That moment stuck with me through the rest of the shift. I got the cat running again, smoothed the run in wider loops to hide my shakes. But inside, doubts piled up like drifts. Competence was my armor back home. Fix the gear, keep moving, don't let them see the cracks. Here, though, the vulnerabilities ran deeper. The city breakup still weighed, that woman's voice echoing in my head, calling me too distant, too afraid to stay. Out here, with the mountain pressing in, I wondered if I was running from that or toward it. Mara's gaze lingered in my mind, peeling back layers I wasn't ready to show. By evening, the debrief gathered us in the dim lodge, lanterns casting long shadows on the beams. The air thickened with proximity, bodies close after the cold, steam rising from mugs of cider. Mara sat across the table, her knee brushing mine under the wood. Accidental, maybe. But the tension from the slope carried over, heavy and unnamed. We talked runs and weather, her voice low, directing without raising it. I nodded, forcing focus, but my body betrayed me, aware of every shift in her posture. You know that pull, don't you? The one that starts small, like a crack in the ice, but spreads if you don't look away. I told myself it was just the altitude messing with my head. The job demanded everything. attention, strength, no room for distractions. Yet as the group thinned out, her eyes met mine again, reserved but searching. The night stretched ahead, the mountain waiting for tomorrow's light. Days blurred into a rhythm after that first shift, the mountain dictating our hours with its unyielding light. Dawn came early, pulling me from the bunkhouse into the bite of pre-sun air. That's when the chairlift started, empty cars swaying like pendulums against the peaks. Mara and I shared one most mornings, protocol for groomers and patrol to sync on overnight changes. No one else joined us. The silence was forced, thick as the frost on the cables. We'd click the safety bar down, the chair jerking upward, lifting us above the shadowed runs. The rising sun painted the ridges gold, but our words stayed sparse. Her breath fogged the space between us, steady, while mine came quicker, betraying the drop below. I gripped the armrest, eyes on the horizon, but awareness of her pulled constant. Her shoulder inches from mine, the way her jacket creaked with each sway. It was that quiet authority she carried, not loud commands, but the certainty of someone who'd stared down avalanches and walked away scarred, but standing. One morning, as we crested the first lift, she pulled the radio from her belt. Hands steady, gloved fingers tuning the dial with a click. "Listen," she said, voice low against the wind. She taught me the avalanche signals then. Short bursts for slide risks, long tones for all clear. Her thumb pressed the button, demonstrating, the static crackle filling the air like a warning. I nodded, repeating the pattern, our knees brushing when the chair dipped. That touch lingered, a spark in the cold, but she didn't pull away. Just kept talking, her words sparse, mapping the mountain's moods like she read its pulse. I watched her during patrol sweeps after, from the cat's cab, as she glided on snowshoes, probing cornices with poles, her movements fluid, deliberate. Quiet authority defined her, directing a junior patroller with a nod, securing a loose marker without fuss. It drew me in, that focus, making the vast white feel intimate. Back in the city, my failed relationship weighed heavy still, that woman's accusations echoing. Too closed off, always one foot out the door. I'd left to escape the noise, the way love there felt like another crowd pressing in. Here, though, Mara's presence chipped at those walls, subtle, like wind carving stone. By the second week, routines deepened. She'd radio ahead on sweeps, her voice cutting the static. "Groomer, hold East Run, fresh slide." I'd comply, feeling the pull of her reliance. One evening, as shifts wound down, she caught me in the equipment shed, tools scattered from my maintenance checks. "Join me for the closing rounds?" It was subtle, phrased as duty, but her eyes tested limits, lingering a beat too long. I agreed, grabbing my pack, the invitation hanging unspoken. We hiked the lower trails together, headlamps cutting the dusk, her steps sure on the crust. Tension built like gathering clouds over the ridge, darkening, heavy with promise of release. The air between us thickened, not just from the chill, but from the weight of proximity, day after day. I caught myself glancing at her profile, the line of her jaw set against the fading light. You know that feeling, the slow press of attraction in a place where everything else demands your edge. It mirrored the mountain. Beautiful, but one slip and you're buried. That night, as we stamped snow from our boots back at the lodge, the radio on her hip crackled to life. Unexpected storm warning, urgent tones pulling us from the warmth. Winds shifting fast, front rolling in from the west. Prep time, securing gear, briefing the crew. Her hand brushed my arm as she turned, eyes meeting mine in the sudden shift. The clouds had gathered for real now, and so had we. The warning hit like a slap from the wind itself, the radio's urgent crackle scattering the crew into motion. We bolted from the lodge, packs slung over shoulders, headlamps slicing the gathering dark. Mara led, her strides eating the snow, voice clipped over the static. "Secure the lifts first, then the sheds. No one staying out longer than necessary." I followed close, the air already thickening with the front's edge, flakes stinging my face like needles. By the time we reached the base, whiteout conditions had rolled in full, visibility dropping to arm's length, the world erased in swirling gray. We split tasks, but the storm pinned us together on the upper runs. Joint effort now, securing equipment against the gusts that howled down the ridges, threatening to bury everything. I wrestled tarps over the snowcat, ropes whipping from my grip, while she anchored the patrol gear in the maintenance bay. Wind tore at the canvas, my fingers numb and fumbling, but her presence steadied me. A glance her way, and she'd nod, wordless, her form a shadow in the blur. We moved like that, bodies brushing in the chaos, urgency binding us tighter than any plan. Then the lift shut down, cables groaning to a halt. No way back without risking the white. Shelter, she said, pointing to the wind-whipped lean-to halfway up the slope, a basic patrol outpost with walls of packed snow and a low roof. We hunkered inside, the storm raging outside, slamming the entrance with fists of ice. Space was tight, barely room to sit without touching. The cold clawed deeper, our breaths visible clouds in the dim. Closer, she murmured, no room for pride. Sharing body heat became necessity, our shoulders pressing, legs aligned against the chill seeping through the walls. In that huddle, words came sparse, pulled out by the isolation. Her voice cut the howl, low and even. Lost a partner here once, 5 years back. Slide took her on a routine sweep. Mountains claim what they want. It wasn't dramatic, just fact. Her claim on this place etched in every syllable. She shifted, the warmth of her side bleeding into mine. And I felt the weight of it, how the ridges had shaped her, hardened the lines around her eyes. Silence followed, but it had a sound. The wind's muffled roar, our breaths sinking in the cold, in and out like a shared rhythm. I guarded my response, words sticking in my throat. Sounds heavy, I managed. Voice guarded, but my body betrayed me, leaning in despite the pull to pull back. Hidden attraction flickered, warm against the freeze. Her scent, pine and clean sweat, cutting through the damp. The city felt worlds away, that failed love a distant ache. But here, proximity stripped the barriers. Mutual isolation hung between us, raw in the lean-to's confines. Rural life did that. Barriers thick as the snowpack, whispers in small towns about who you loved, eyes on every move. Out here, it's hard to let anyone close, I said finally, the admission slipping out. Folks judge quick, and the quiet amplifies it. She nodded, gaze steady in the low light from our lantern. Yeah, but sometimes the mountain forces it. No more words then, just the press of her arm, the way her breath warmed the space near my neck. Tension coiled like a spring under powder, ready to shift. We sat like that through the night's peak, the storm's fury mirroring the unspoken risks inside. Dawn cracked the white eventually, the wind easing to a whisper, clearing weather peeling back the veil. We emerged stiff but whole, the slopes gleaming under fresh blue. That encounter lingered, pulling us into deeper daily integration, shifts overlapping more, glances holding longer. The mountain had tested us, and in surviving, we'd edged closer, the barriers thinning like melting crust. The days after the storm settled into a sharper edge, the mountain's fresh coat demanding more from us both. Night stretched long in the bunkhouse, the wind rattling the windows like unanswered questions. I'd wake to solo runs, firing up the cat in the dark, the engine's growl my only company on the empty slopes. Isolation hit hardest then, the vast white swallowing sound, leaving just the hum in my ears. That's when the radio crackled, her voice cutting through, steady and low. Groomer, status on West Ridge? I'd key the mic, breath fogging, reporting powder depth and ice spots. Her responses came sparse, but they anchored me, voices bridging the cold miles. No one else tuned in at that hour. It felt private, like sharing secrets with the static. One dawn, I nailed a tricky groom on the Black Diamond run, smoothing the moguls without a single jerk. The cat purred smooth under my hands, treads biting just right. As I shut down at the base, she was there, snowshoes planted, arms crossed in that familiar way. For the first time, a rare smile cracked her face. Small, but real, warming the chill like sun on crust. Good work, she said, voice carrying a note I'd never heard, rewarding the effort without fanfare. It hit me square, that approval, loosening something tight in my chest, Her eyes held mine a second longer, the smile fading, but the warmth lingering. I nodded, throat dry, pretending to check the gauges. Bonding came through the labor next, the kind that wore you down but built you up. A lift cable snapped midweek, frayed from wind stress, stranding chairs halfway up the peak. We climbed together, harnesses clipped, tools clinking against our belts. Side by side on the tower, wind tugging at our jackets, we spliced the line. Her hands guiding the wire through the clamps, mine feeding the tension. Fingers brushed often, deliberate in the tight space. Her grip steady as she twisted the final knot. Sweat beaded despite the cold, our breaths sinking with the effort. "Hold it here," she'd say, voice close. And I'd comply, aware of her hip against mine on the narrow platform. The work stripped us to basics, muscle and trust, no room for pretense. Below, the resort sprawled small, skiers dots on the white, oblivious to the height we balanced, but doubts not inside, even as we grew closer. The resort was conservative, tucked in these mountains where whispers traveled faster than avalanches. Workplace scrutiny loomed, eyes from the lodge staff, the old-timers in the bar trading glances if we lingered too long after shifts. What if they saw the way I watched her? Or how her hands steadied on my back during a gust? Fear coiled tight, the kind that made you scan for judgment in every nod. Out here, being who we were meant hiding in plain sight, the rural barriers thick as fog in the valleys. One wrong look, and the job, the fragile routine, could shatter. It felt like edging a crevasse. Beautiful from afar, but up close, the emotional risk mirrored the slope dangers. One step from a drop that swallowed you. The pull toward her was that hidden fracture, tempting, deadly if ignored. You know that unspoken weight, don't you? Heavy in your gut, the attraction building without words, demanding you face the void or turn back. That tension peaked one afternoon, the radio silent for once, as I pushed the cat harder on a steep traverse. A patch gave way, ice under powder, and the machine slid, jolting me against the dash. Pain shot through my ankle, sharp and hot, the cat grinding to a halt inches from a drop. I keyed the mic, voice tight. "Patrol, need assist, west traverse." Her response came immediate, snowshoes crunching fast. She reached me first, face set, helping me out with hands firm on my arms. Reliance shifted then, her support pulling us tighter, the injury forcing us beyond the slopes into uncharted ground. The ankle throbbed for days after that slide, wrapped tight and propped during off hours. But the mountain didn't pause for pain. Mara checked it herself that first night, her fingers probing the swell with clinical care, eyes flicking up to meet mine. "Sprained, not broken. Ice it and walk it off." Her touch lingered a fraction too long, warm through the bandage, before she pulled back. Reliance had tipped already. She drove me down in the patrol truck, the cab silent except for the crunch of tires on crust. But work pulled us out again, the slopes demanding full measure. It happened mid-patrol, a week into my limp. Bluebird Day, skiers carving the fresh powder like it was theirs to claim. I was on the cat, scouting a run for grooming, radio clipped to my shoulder. Static burst first, junior patroller's voice edged with panic. "Chief, wipe out on the double black. Skiers down, possible spinal." Mara's response cut sharp. "On it. Hold position." She was closest, snowmobile roaring to life from the ridge, red jacket a slash against the white. I keyed my mic without thinking. "Groomer en route, can assist." Ankle be damned. The engine growled as I veered toward the coordinates, adrenaline spiking over the ache. By the time I crested, chaos etched the snow. The skier lay twisted at the base of a chute, board snapped, blood spotting the powder from a head gash. Mara knelt beside him, gloves off, checking vitals with steady hands. Pulse, breath, no movement below the neck. Her face was all focus, authority unchallenged, directing the junior to radio medevac while she stabilized his neck with a collar from her pack. "You," she said, spotting me, voice level but urgent. "Help with extraction. Sleds upslope. Get it down slow." Adrenaline fueled us, turning the world narrow and sharp. I ignored the ankle's protest, crunching through the crust to fetch the rescue toboggan, dragging it back with ropes biting my palms. We worked in sync, her calls guiding. Ease him onto the board, watch the legs. My hands shook from the cold and rush, but hers steadied mine on the straps, a brief press that grounded me. The skier groaned as we lifted, his weight heavy, the slope's angle fighting every inch. Wind picked up, whipping snow into our faces, but we pushed together, muscles straining, breaths ragged in the thin air. Teamwork like that stripped everything else. City doubts, hidden pulls, down to survival. Her shoulder against mine as we crested the flat.
Medevac chopper thumped in 20 minutes later, blades turning the powder into a white haze. We handed him off, watching the bird lift away, then trudged to the nearest hut for debrief. Exhaustion hit like a wall once the door shut. The small space dim with a single lantern, stove flickering warmth against the walls. We stripped outer layers, steam rising from damp wool, defenses crumbling in the quiet. My ankle buckled as I sank to the bench, pain flaring fresh. Mara knelt again, closer now, peeling back the wrap to inspect. Pushed it too far, she murmured, voice softening from the edge. Confession fragments slipped out then, the hut's confines pulling words like gravity. I don't let people in easy, she said, dabbing salve on the bruise, her gaze on the task, but heavy with memory. Last time I did, partner from the city, full of fire, betrayed me for someone safer, left me holding the pieces after a bad call on the slopes. Reluctance etched her words, sparse as her usual talk, but raw, the mountain scars mirroring her own. I nodded, throat tight, my hand covering hers on my leg. Sounds like it carved deep. Her hands lingered on the wounds, tracing the ankle's curve, taut muscle under my touch as I steadied her arm. The air thickened, professional lines blurring in the heat of the moment, her breath close, eyes lifting to hold mine, unflinching, but vulnerable. Proximity burned, the pole we'd circled now electric, stakes heightened by the day's edge. One wrong word and we'd tip over, job and all. But neither moved away. The silence charged, breaths sinking like before the storm. Recovery days followed, my ankle sidelining me from the cat, but forcing closer off-duty interactions. Her bringing meals to the bunkhouse, evenings by the fire where talk turned personal, the mountain's hold loosening just enough for us to lean in. Those recovery days blurred the lines between work and whatever this was becoming. My ankle kept me off the slopes, but the bunkhouse became our quiet anchor. Staff quarters tucked behind the lodge where the world felt smaller. Evenings there, after the day's chatter died, we'd share coffee by the fire, her brewing it strong in the dented pot, steam curling up like secrets in the low light. The flames crackled soft, casting shadows on the rough-hewn walls, the scent of pine logs mixing with the bitter roast. She'd hand me a mug, fingers brushing deliberate now, no pretense of accident. We'd sit close on the worn couch, legs aligned, the warmth seeping through the chill that never quite left these mountains. Talk came easier in that glow, words spilling like meltwater from the eaves. She spoke of her rural upbringing first, raised in a valley town hours from here, where winters meant chopping wood before dawn and summers herding cattle through dust-choked passes. Family pressures hung unspoken in her pauses. The expectation to marry local, settle with a man who knew the land's rhythms, not chase signals on a radio or stare down slides. They stopped asking after a while, she said, gaze on the fire, voice low. But the weight stays. I nodded, sharing my own fragments. City girl through and through, but with roots in a small farm town I'd fled young. The unspoken judgments there about girls like us. The way love got tangled in church pews and neighbor stairs. Her eyes met mine then, unflinching. The shared silence a bridge over those old chasms. One night, as the fire popped and embers settled, she pulled out her weather log. A battered notebook, pages filled with scribbles of fronts and barometer drops. Reading the skies like reading anything alive, she said, leaning in, her shoulder warm against mine. She traced the ridges on a sketched map, explaining the signs. High clouds feathering in before a storm. the way wind shifts sharp off the peaks, signaling trouble below. It was guidance, patient, her finger pausing on a swirl of isobars. But the metaphor sank deeper. Reading weather like reading hearts. The subtle shifts in pressure, the buildup you ignore at your peril. Her voice dropped. Miss one cue, and it buries you. I felt it then, the parallel to us. The way her presence stirred currents I'd long kept calm. The chill deepened as the fire waned, drafts sneaking through the cracks. She reached over, adjusting my scarf with a steady hand, tucking the wool tighter around my neck. First intentional touch. No wind or work to blame. Her fingers lingered on my collarbone, warm and sure, eyes holding mine in the dim. My pulse thudded, heavy as a distant rumble. Body feeling like betrayal to old fears, the city X's words echoing, calling me guarded, afraid of the fall. Here, though, the pull was gravity itself, drawing me toward her resilience, the mountain's quiet mirroring the ache in my chest. I didn't pull away, just breathed, the air between us thick with what we'd left unsaid. Dry humor cut the tension later, as we cleared the mugs, my ankle still wobbling on the uneven floor. I teetered, grabbing the arm of the couch, and she steadied me with a hand on my waist. Steady as a first-time skier, she said, the corner of her mouth quirking, that rare smile flashing. I laughed, low and real, the awkwardness shared like the warmth from the stove. Yeah, or a calf on ice, I shot back, the words easing us, making the space feel less like a ledge. But the season's midpoint loomed, contract renewal papers stacking on my bunk. Decision time. Stay through the thaw, or head back to the city's grind. The mountain had changed me, her presence carving paths I hadn't planned. As we banked the fire that night, her hand squeezed my shoulder, a silent question in the touch. Renewal meant roots, or running again. The choice pressed like gathering clouds, heavy with what came next. The renewal papers sat on my bunk like a challenge, the fine print blurring under the bunkhouse lamp. Midpoint in the season, and the mountain's rhythm had shifted, thaws teasing the lower runs, but the peaks still holding their white grip. Mara noticed my distraction during a briefing, her eyes narrowing as I skimmed the safety protocols she'd drilled into us. Focus, she said, voice edged sharper than usual, handing me the clipboard. One slip in these conditions, and you're done. It sparked then, the argument brewing like a front you see coming but can't steer. We were in the patrol office, maps spread on the scarred table, steam from our coffees curling up. I pushed back, too cautious on the groomer routes, her protocols tying my hands, when the runs needed wider cuts for the softening snow. It's not reckless, I shot back, heat rising in my chest. It's practical. You've got me treating every patch like a crevasse. Her jaw set, authority cracking just enough to show the care beneath, eyes flashing, not with anger but worry, the kind that came from seeing too many close calls. Practical gets people killed, she countered, leaning in, the space between us charged. I've pulled enough from the white to know. The words hung, her reserved shell thinning, revealing the weight she carried for all of us, me included. I backed down, but the friction lingered, pulling at the threads we'd woven. That clash drove me out alone the next day off, solo hike up the back trail to clear my head. The path wound steep, through pines heavy with frost, my boots crunching the crust, breath laboring in the thinning air. Attraction had been building like a slow avalanche, subtle shifts in the snowpack, pressure mounting until the whole face gave way. I paused at an overlook, the resort a speck below, wind tugging at my hood. It hit me full there, the pull toward her. Not just the steady hands or quiet smiles, but the way she made the isolation feel shared, less like a void. Body and mind tangled, old fears whispering I'd shatter it all. But ignoring it felt like denying the slide, waiting for the rumble to bury me. She found me on the way down, snowshoes whispering from the ridge. Had been tracking my radio silence, she said later. We sat on a fallen log, the view stretching to jagged peaks, her presence a steady warmth against the gusts. Vulnerability cracked open then, her words sparse but raw. Transient workers like you, they come for the season, take what they need, leave scars. Fear laced her voice, eyes on the horizon, the admission pulled from deep. Past ones had drifted in, stirred something, then vanished with the melt, taking pieces of her resilience. I patched the slopes, but not the rest, she added, voice low. The mountain's claim on her mirrored in the tension of her shoulders. I reached out, hand on her knee, the touch grounding us both. I'm not drifting, I said, the confession slipping free. Not from this. Not from you. Reconciliation came quiet in the boot room that evening. Steam rising thick from the drying racks, our gear slung over the heaters like shed skins. The air hummed with the hum of vents, warm and close, chasing the hike's chill. She unlaced her boots first, movements deliberate. Then knelt to help with mine, fingers brushing my ankles where the sprain had faded. No words at first, just the press of her palm, steadying. Tension eased like fog lifting, our knees touching on the damp floor, breaths sinking in the haze. Sorry for pushing, I murmured, and she nodded, gaze softening. Me too. Just care too much sometimes. The steam wrapped us, blurring edges, making the world feel safe for once. But the wind's howl outside carried a warning, ignored in my heart, the kind you hear but push aside, thinking the calm will hold. It mirrored the risks we'd skirted, the emotional gales building unseen. As we stood, jacket slung over arms, she paused at the door. Off resort tomorrow? There's a hot spring, hour's drive, if you're staying. Commitment hinted in the invitation, casual but weighted, eyes searching mine for the choice. I nodded, pulse quickening. Roots or run? The papers waited, but her hand on my back decided it. That night, the radio crackled with forecasts. Major blizzard rolling in, winds to bury the lifts. The mountain tested us again. Survival pulling us together into the storm's heart. The blizzard hit harder than any forecast, winds screaming down the canyons like the mountain's rage unleashed. We'd prepped all afternoon, securing the lifts, boarding the lodge windows, but the front barreled in faster, visibility gone in sheets of white. Mara and I were on the upper patrol route when it locked down, radio crackling warnings to hunker nearest shelter. The remote cabin sat a mile out, a squat outpost at treeline, stocked for nights like this. No choice. We shouldered packs, linked arms against the gusts, and pushed through the white wall, snow blasting our faces like grit from a grinder. My legs burned, each step sinking to the knee, but her grip anchored me, steady through the howl. We burst through the door as dark fell, the cabin's walls shuddering under the assault. Dim lantern light flickered from the single bulb, casting long shadows on the rough logs. Space was tight, a bunk, table, small stove hissing on propane. We shook off the snow, steam rising from our jackets like ghosts, but the cold clung deep, fingers numb as we inventoried. Resource rationing kicked in immediate. Half a tank of fuel for the stove, tins of stew and crackers for 2 days max, water from melted snow. Ration the heat, she said, voice cutting the wind's muffled roar, twisting the valve low. The flame danced weak, barely chasing the chill from the corners. We shed wet layers down to thermals, hanging them by the stove, bodies close in the cramped space to share what warmth we had. Night pressed in, the lantern dimming to save batteries, shadows pooling around us on the bunk. Physical closeness was survival now. Shoulder to shoulder, legs tangled under the thin blanket, her breath warm on my neck. The air thickened, not just from the damp, but from the weight of isolation, the storm sealing us like a crevasse collapse. Words started raw, pulled by the dark. This place, it takes everything, she murmured, gaze on the lantern's glow, unflinching but edged with fatigue. Past pains surfaced then, sparse confessions in the low light. After the betrayal, I thought I'd hardened enough. No more letting in. But you see through it. Her voice cracked slight, admissions of desire slipping free,
The way my presence stirred her, quiet pulls she'd ignored like early wind shifts. Want you close, not just for the cold. I turned, our faces inches, the lantern etching lines on her face. Same, I said, throat tight, body leaning in despite the fears. The city's scars ached, running from love that burned too fast, but here, desire built slow, like pressure under ice. Her hand found mine under the blanket, fingers interlacing, taut from the cold but warming. Silence broke fully then, her unflinching gaze softening, eyes holding mine with a vulnerability I'd only glimpsed. No more holding back, she whispered, pulling me nearer, the decision shared in that press. Crossing professional boundaries, the mountain's rules forgotten in the storm's heart. Lips met tentative, then sure, warmth blooming against the freeze, hands tracing shoulders, waists, the touch electric in the dim. It wasn't rush, but release. Bodies aligning, breaths sinking deeper, her resilience wrapping me like the ridges outside. Emotional payoff hit quiet, finding home in her strength, the way she held me through the gale, not as chief or survivor, but as equal, in the quiet truth. The storm raged on, but inside, we'd claimed our ground. Desires admitted, pains shared like rations, sustaining us. Dawn filtered gray through the frosted window 2 days later, the wind easing to whispers, storm breaking like a fever. We emerged into clearing skies, the world scoured clean, but changed. Season's end loomed now, contracts and choices pressing, the blizzard's test etching our path forward. The storm's break brought a fragile calm, the peak standing stark under a sky washed clean. Spring thaw crept in slow after that, edges of the runs turning slushy under the strengthening sun, water trickling from cornices, like the mountain shedding its winter skin. My contract papers had gathered dust on the bunkhouse shelf through the blizzard's lock-in, but now they demanded answer. Sign for extension. Root here through the mud and green up, or pack for the city's pull. The season's end loomed close, lifts slowing as tourists thinned, the resort quieting to its bones. I waited nights, staring at the rafters, Mara's steady breath from the bunk across the room anchoring my thoughts. Running felt like the old pattern, fleeing before the melt exposed too much. Staying meant facing the quiet truths we'd unearthed in the cabin. Desires admitted, boundaries crossed. Her resilience wrapping mine like intertwined roots under the snow. Decision came quiet, no grand declaration. One morning, as the first birds scratched at the eaves, I slid the papers across the patrol office desk to her. Extending, I said, voice steady, meeting her unflinching gaze. She nodded, fingers brushing mine as she took them, the touch carrying the certainty we'd built. No words needed. Her rare smile flickered, warming the draft from the window. Quiet commitment sealed it then, choosing the mountain's rhythms over the city's noise, putting down stakes in this remote place where we'd found each other. Roots took hold subtle, like saplings pushing through rocky soil. Her presence, the soil that made it possible. The rural barriers still loomed, whispers in the valley towns, the conservative weight of eyes on women like us. But together they felt navigable, less like walls and more like ridges to crest. Our final patrol together marked the shift, the last sweep before the lifts shuttered for good. We rode the chair up at dawn, the world below greening in patches, snow retreating to high pockets. No safety bar this time. We sat open, shoulders touching as the car swayed higher. Her hand found mine midway, gloved fingers interlacing with a squeeze, certainty threading through the grip like a secure line on a steep face. The air warmed, carrying scents of pine resin and damp earth, the mechanical hum fading to birdsong. At the peak, we stepped off into the soft crust, boots sinking less now, the view unfolding endless. Canyons unfolding to valleys, the resort a distant cluster below. She pulled me close, arms wrapping my waist, our breaths sinking against the wind that no longer bit. Hope bloomed there, shared in the silence,
the world less quiet with her beside me. Lifts would spin again come fall, but we'd be here, patrolling the turns together.
Reflection hit on the descent, the chair carrying us down slow. I'd come for escape, the silence to drown the city's echoes, that failed love, the crowds pressing my edges raw. The mountain had given more, not just survival on unpredictable slopes, but belonging, carved from shared labors and storms. Mara's quiet authority had peeled my guards, revealing the woman who'd run too long from connections that scared deep. Now, with her hand still warm in mine, the journey felt complete, from outsider crunching fresh snow to partner claiming the ridges. The thaw mirrored it, ice giving way to flow, vulnerabilities turning to strength. You know this truth, don't you? The one that lingers after the gale, quiet but unshakable, pulling you toward home in another's eyes. If you felt it, the slow root of love in hard ground, the certainty after the risk, it stays, marking the path forward. The door to our future clicked open that spring. No turning back now. The mountain holding us steady. If this quiet truth resonates, share your story below and subscribe for more Sapphic journeys like this one.